Sarah Martinez had always been different from other women her age. While her friends spent their 20s building careers in offices and starting families, she dedicated her life to serving her country in ways most people could never imagine. The 32-year-old woman possessed a quiet strength that came from years of rigorous training and dangerous missions that she could never fully discuss with anyone outside her unit. On a warm Tuesday afternoon in downtown San Diego, Sarah decided to stop by the local military surplus store to pick up some gear she needed for an upcoming training exercise. She wore her service uniform, complete with all the insignia and patches she had earned through blood, sweat, and countless hours of preparation. The Navy SEAL trident on her chest gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the store, a symbol of her extraordinary achievements in one of the military's most elite units. As she browsed through the tactical equipment section, Sarah noticed other customers glancing at her with curiosity. She was used to the stares by now. Women in her position were still rare, and many people had never seen a female Navy SEAL in person. The looks didn't bother her anymore. She had learned long ago to focus on her mission and ignore the whispers and pointing fingers that sometimes followed her. The store clerk, a middle-aged man named Robert who had served in the Army during the Gulf War, watched Sarah with growing suspicion. He had seen many military personnel come through his shop over the years, but something about this woman didn't sit right with him. In his mind, women simply couldn't be Navy SEALs. He had heard rumors about changes in military policy, but he refused to believe that the standards had been lowered to accommodate female soldiers. Robert decided to call the military police. He was convinced that Sarah was impersonating a service member, which was a serious federal crime. As he dialed the number, he felt a sense of duty washing over him. He believed he was protecting the honor of real soldiers by exposing what he saw as a fraud. The woman might have fooled others with her confident demeanor and authentic-looking uniform, but she couldn't fool someone with his experience. Within 20 minutes, 2 military police officers arrived at the store. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson and Corporal Lisa Chen entered with serious expressions on their faces. They had responded to similar calls before, usually involving people wearing military uniforms they hadn't earned or trying to get military discounts they weren't entitled to. These cases were always awkward, especially when the person genuinely believed they had the right to wear the uniform. Sarah was examining a tactical vest when she noticed the MPs approaching her. She immediately recognized what was happening and felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. This wasn't the first time her presence in uniform had been questioned, and she knew it probably wouldn't be the last. The challenge of being a woman in her position meant constantly proving herself to people who refused to believe she belonged. Staff Sergeant Thompson cleared his throat to get her attention. "Excuse me, ma'am. We need to see your identification and military credentials immediately." His tone was professional but firm, the voice of someone who had dealt with military imposters before. Sarah could see the skepticism in his eyes as he looked at her uniform, particularly focusing on the SEAL trident that seemed to offend his sensibilities. Sarah calmly reached for her wallet and military ID card. She had learned early in her career that getting defensive or angry in these situations only made things worse. She handed over her credentials with the same composure she maintained during high-pressure missions. "Here you go, Staff Sergeant. Is there a problem?" Thompson examined the ID carefully, looking for signs of forgery. The photograph matched the woman standing before him, and the card appeared genuine. But he had been trained to look for sophisticated fakes. What troubled him most was the idea that this petite woman could have completed the grueling SEAL training program that broke most men who attempted it. "Ma'am, we've received reports that you might be impersonating a Navy SEAL," Corporal Chen said, stepping closer to examine Sarah's uniform. "These patches and insignia indicate a level of service that would be unusual for someone of your demographic." Her choice of words was careful, but the meaning was clear. Sarah felt the familiar sting of discrimination, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand your confusion, but I assure you that my service record is legitimate. I completed BUDS training 3 years ago and have been an active member of SEAL Team 7 ever since." She spoke with the confidence of someone who had nothing to hide, but she could see that her words weren't having the desired effect. The store clerk, Robert, approached the group with a satisfied expression on his face. "I knew something wasn't right," he said, pointing at Sarah. "I've been around military folks my whole life, and there's no way a woman could be a real Navy SEAL. Those guys are the toughest warriors in the world. No offense, lady, but you just don't have what it takes." Sarah turned to face Robert, her eyes flashing with controlled anger. "With respect, sir, you don't know anything about what I've been through or what I'm capable of. I've earned my place in this unit through the same training and trials as every other SEAL." Her voice remained professional, but there was steel underneath that made even Thompson take notice. The MPs exchanged glances, uncertain about how to proceed. The woman's credentials appeared authentic, but their training had taught them to be suspicious of anything that seemed out of the ordinary. Female Navy SEALs were so rare that many service members had never encountered one personally. The doubt in their minds grew stronger as they considered the implications of making a mistake either way. "Ma'am, we're going to need to take you in for further verification," Thompson decided. "This situation requires additional investigation to confirm your identity and service record." He reached for his handcuffs. A standard procedure when dealing with potential military imposters. The sight of the metal restraints caused several other customers in the store to stop and stare. Sarah's heart sank as she realized how serious the situation had become. Being arrested for impersonating a service member was not just embarrassing. It was a federal crime that could result in significant jail time and fines. She knew that her commanding officers would eventually sort out the confusion, but the damage to her reputation and career could be lasting. "This is a mistake," she said as Thompson began to read her rights. "You're arresting an active-duty Navy SEAL based on someone's assumption about what women can and cannot do." Her words carried the weight of frustration built up over years of fighting for recognition and respect in a male-dominated field. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Sarah felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. The other customers in the store were now openly staring, some taking pictures with their phones. She knew that within hours, images of her arrest would be circulating on social media, potentially damaging not just her own reputation, but also the reputation of women in the military who were fighting for acceptance. The drive to the military police station was conducted in tense silence. Sarah sat in the back of the patrol car, her mind racing through the potential consequences of this incident. She thought about her teammates who were counting on her for their next mission, her family who had sacrificed so much to support her military career, and the young women who looked up to her as a role model. At the station, Sarah was processed like any other suspect. Her fingerprints were taken, photographs were captured, and she was placed in a holding cell while the MPs began their investigation. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was being treated like a criminal for wearing the uniform she had earned through some of the most challenging training in the world. Hours passed as Sarah waited in the small, sterile cell. She used the time to mentally prepare for the conversations she would need to have with her superiors once this mess was sorted out. She also thought about the broader implications of what had happened. If a decorated Navy SEAL could be arrested simply for wearing her earned uniform, what did that say about the progress women had made in the military? The military police station buzzed with activity as Staff Sergeant Thompson began the complicated process of verifying Sarah Martinez's military credentials. He sat at his computer terminal, pecking away at the keyboard with the methodical precision of someone who took his job seriously. The database searches he needed to conduct would take time, and he knew that making an error in either direction could have serious consequences for his career. Corporal Chen assisted with the investigation, making phone calls to various military departments to cross-reference the information on Sarah's identification documents. Each call seemed to raise more questions than answers. The personnel they spoke with confirmed that Sarah Martinez was indeed listed as an active-duty Navy SEAL, but several of the desk officers expressed surprise at this information. In her holding cell, Sarah tried to remain patient as the hours dragged by. She understood that the MPs were just doing their job, but the situation felt increasingly surreal. She had survived some of the most dangerous combat situations imaginable, completed missions that would terrify most people, and earned the respect of some of the toughest warriors in the military. Yet here she was, sitting in a jail cell because someone couldn't believe a woman could achieve what she had achieved. As evening approached, word of the unusual arrest began to spread through the military community. Phone calls were made between various offices, and emails were sent to commanding officers who needed to be informed about the situation. The case was becoming more complicated by the hour, especially as more people became involved in trying to verify Sarah's identity and service record. Thompson had been on the phone with the Naval Special Warfare Command for over an hour, trying to get definitive confirmation about Sarah's status. The officers he spoke with seemed frustrated by his repeated questions, but they patiently explained that Sarah Martinez was indeed a legitimate member of SEAL Team 7. However, Thompson remained skeptical, wondering if there might be some kind of administrative error in the system. Meanwhile, Sarah's absence had been noticed by her teammates. When she failed to show up for a scheduled briefing, her commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez, began making inquiries about her whereabouts. Rodriguez was a veteran of multiple combat deployments and had personally overseen much of Sarah's training. He knew better than anyone what she had accomplished to earn her position. The first call Rodriguez made was to Sarah's cell phone, which went straight to voicemail. This was unusual because Sarah was known for being extremely reliable and always reachable when needed. He then began calling hospitals and checking with other team members to see if anyone had heard from her. The growing concern in his voice was evident to everyone who spoke with him. Back at the police station, Chen was reviewing Sarah's service record more carefully. The documents showed an impressive list of accomplishments, including several classified missions that were marked with security clearances Chen didn't even have access to. The more she read, the more convinced she became that they might have made a serious error in arresting this woman. "Sergeant Thompson," Chen called across the office, "you need to look at this file more carefully. This woman has been awarded 3 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star. Her training records show completion of not just BUDS, but also advanced courses that most SEALs never even attempt." Her voice carried a note of concern that hadn't been there earlier. Thompson walked over to examine the documents Chen was reviewing. As he read through Sarah's service history, his confidence in the arrest began to waver. The woman they had taken into custody wasn't just claiming to be a Navy SEAL. According to these records, she was one of the most decorated SEALs in her unit. The reality of their situation was beginning to sink in. At the same time, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez had traced Sarah's last known location to the military surplus store where she had been arrested. When he called the store to inquire about any incidents that might have occurred there, Robert reluctantly admitted that he had called the military police about a woman who was pretending to be a Navy SEAL. Rodriguez felt his blood pressure rising as he listened to Robert's explanation. "Sir," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "the woman you reported is one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege to command. She has risked her life for this country more times than I can count, and she has earned every piece of insignia on her uniform through dedication and sacrifice that few people could imagine." The phone conversation with Rodriguez was a wake-up call for Robert, who had never considered that he might be wrong about Sarah's credentials. The certainty he had felt earlier was rapidly evaporating as the reality of the situation became clear. He had potentially ruined the reputation of a genuine war hero based on his own prejudices and assumptions. Rodriguez immediately contacted the military police station where Sarah was being held. His conversation with Thompson was brief and to the point. "You are holding one of my best soldiers on completely baseless charges," he said. "I want her released immediately, and I want a full explanation of how this situation was allowed to happen." Thompson felt a sinking feeling in his stomach as he realized the magnitude of the mistake they had made. The woman they had arrested wasn't a fraud. She was exactly who she claimed to be. Moreover, she was apparently held in high regard by her commanding officers and had a service record that most military personnel could only dream of achieving. As the evening wore on, more details about Sarah's service began to emerge. Phone calls revealed that she had been personally commended by high-ranking officers for her performance in combat situations. She had successfully completed missions that had been considered extremely dangerous, and her tactical knowledge was considered exceptional even by SEAL standards. The investigation also revealed that Sarah had been involved in several classified operations that had directly contributed to national security objectives. The nature of these missions couldn't be discussed in detail, but the officers who had worked with her spoke in glowing terms about her professionalism, courage, and effectiveness under pressure. Chen began preparing the paperwork necessary to release Sarah from custody, but both MPs knew that the damage had already been done. They had arrested a decorated war hero based on assumptions and prejudice, and the incident would likely have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. In her cell, Sarah could hear increased activity in the station as more phone calls were made and more people became involved in her case. She suspected that her commanding officers had been notified and were working to resolve the situation. However, she also knew that the humiliation of being arrested would follow her for the rest of her career. As midnight approached, Thompson finally received the call he had been dreading. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to a colonel who was not pleased about having to deal with this situation. "Sergeant Thompson," the colonel said, "you have arrested one of the most valuable assets in naval special warfare based on a civilian's complaint. This woman has served her country with distinction, and you have treated her like a common criminal." The colonel's words hit Thompson like a physical blow. He realized that his career might never recover from this incident. Arresting an innocent person was bad enough, but arresting a decorated Navy SEAL based on gender bias was a career-ending mistake that would likely result in disciplinary action and possibly criminal charges. As Thompson prepared to release Sarah from custody, he couldn't help but reflect on how his assumptions had led to this catastrophic error. He had allowed his preconceived notions about women in combat roles to cloud his judgment, and the result was an incident that would shame him for the rest of his life. The following morning brought an unexpected development that would transform the entire situation from an embarrassing mistake into something much more significant. General Patricia Hayes, a 3-star general and one of the highest-ranking women in the military, was conducting an inspection tour of military facilities in the San Diego area. When news of Sarah's arrest reached her office, she immediately altered her schedule to personally visit the military police station. General Hayes was a legendary figure in military circles. She had broken through countless barriers during her 30-year career, facing discrimination and skepticism similar to what Sarah had experienced. The general had heard about promising young female officers like Sarah Martinez, and she was particularly interested in meeting someone who had successfully completed SEAL training and was serving in active combat roles. Sarah was still processing the events of the previous day when the guards informed her that she had a very important visitor. She had been released from custody just a few hours earlier, but the paperwork and formal procedures had kept her at the station much longer than anticipated. Her uniform was wrinkled, and she felt exhausted from the ordeal, but she tried to present herself as professionally as possible. When General Hayes entered the small conference room where Sarah was waiting, The young SEAL immediately snapped to attention and rendered a crisp salute. The general returned the salute and gestured for Sarah to be seated. For a few moments, Hayes studied the woman before her, taking note of the insignia on her uniform and the bearing that spoke of exceptional military training. General Hayes had seen many military personnel throughout her career, and she had developed an eye for recognizing genuine warriors. Sarah Martinez possessed the quiet confidence and alert demeanor that marked her as someone who had seen real combat and proven herself under the most challenging conditions. The general was particularly impressed by how Sarah had maintained her composure throughout the humiliating arrest. "Petty Officer Martinez," the general began, her voice carrying the authority of decades of military leadership, "I want you to know that what happened to you yesterday was completely unacceptable. No service member should ever be subjected to that kind of treatment, especially not someone with your record of distinguished service." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her as she realized that someone in authority finally understood the injustice of her situation. "Thank you, General. I appreciate your support more than I can express." Her voice was steady, but the general could see the emotional impact that the arrest had taken on the young woman. General Hayes leaned forward and examined the ribbons and patches on Sarah's uniform more closely. Her eyes lingered on the Navy SEAL trident, a symbol that represented some of the most challenging training in the military. She also noticed the Bronze Star ribbons and other decorations that told the story of Sarah's exceptional service record. "Tell me about this Silver Star," the general said, pointing to one of the ribbons on Sarah's chest. "I've read the citation, but I'd like to hear about the mission from your perspective." The general's request wasn't casual curiosity. She was genuinely interested in understanding the kind of operations Sarah had been involved in. Sarah described the mission that had earned her the Silver Star, speaking in the measured tones of a professional soldier reporting to a superior officer. She explained how her unit had been tasked with rescuing hostages from a heavily defended compound in a hostile territory. The mission had required precise coordination, exceptional physical endurance, and split-second decision-making under intense enemy fire. As Sarah recounted the details of the operation, General Hayes could see why this young woman had earned the respect of her fellow SEALs. The mission she described would have challenged the most experienced special operations soldiers, and Sarah had not only completed her assigned tasks, but had also taken initiative that had saved the lives of both hostages and fellow team members. The general asked about other missions Sarah had completed, and each story reinforced her impression that this was an exceptional soldier who had proven herself repeatedly in the most demanding circumstances. Sarah spoke about operations in multiple theaters of conflict, describing situations where her skills and judgment had been critical to mission success. During their conversation, General Hayes learned more about the challenges Sarah had faced throughout her military career. The arrest was just the latest in a series of incidents where her presence in uniform had been questioned by people who couldn't accept that women could serve in elite military units. Sarah had endured years of skepticism, additional scrutiny, and constant pressure to prove herself over and over again. The general was particularly struck by Sarah's response to these challenges. Rather than becoming bitter or defensive, she had channeled her frustration into motivation to excel even further. Her service record showed a pattern of exceptional performance that had earned her the respect of commanding officers and fellow soldiers who had initially been skeptical about her capabilities. As their conversation continued, Staff Sergeant Thompson and Corporal Chen were called into the conference room to meet with General Hayes. Both MPs were visibly nervous as they entered, knowing that their handling of Sarah's case would be scrutinized by one of the highest-ranking officers in the military. General Hayes looked at both MPs with an expression that conveyed deep disappointment. "Sergeant Thompson, Corporal Chen," she began, her voice carrying the weight of command authority, "yesterday you arrested one of the most decorated soldiers in naval special warfare based on assumptions and prejudice rather than facts and evidence." Thompson's face flushed with embarrassment as he realized that his career was likely over. The general continued. Petty Officer Martinez has risked her life for this country on multiple occasions. She has completed training that breaks most men who attempt it, and she has served with distinction in combat operations that most soldiers will never see. Your actions yesterday were not just a mistake. They were a betrayal of the values our military stands for. The general's words hit both MPs like physical blows. Chen found herself unable to meet the general's eyes as the full weight of their error became clear. They had allowed their preconceptions to override their training and judgment, resulting in the arrest of a genuine American hero. General Hayes then addressed the broader implications of the incident. This situation highlights a problem that extends far beyond this police station, she said. We have women serving with honor and distinction in every branch of the military. Yet they continue to face skepticism and discrimination from people who refuse to acknowledge their capabilities and contributions. The general announced that the incident would be thoroughly investigated and that new training protocols would be implemented to prevent similar situations from occurring in the future. She also indicated that both Thompson and Chen would face disciplinary action for their handling of the case, though the specific consequences would be determined through proper military channels. Before leaving the station, General Hayes made one final gesture that would become legendary in military circles. She personally pinned a special commendation ribbon to Sarah's uniform, recognizing not just her service record but also the grace and professionalism she had shown during the arrest ordeal. The ribbon was a symbol that Sarah had overcome not just enemy fire, but also the prejudice of her own countrymen. News of the incident and the general's intervention quickly spread throughout the military community. Sarah's story became a symbol of both the challenges faced by women in the military and their exceptional contributions to national defense. The incident sparked conversations about discrimination, assumptions, and the need for better education about the evolving roles of women in combat positions. In the weeks that followed, Sarah returned to her duties with SEAL Team 7, but her experience had changed her perspective on her role in the military. She began speaking at military academies and training facilities, sharing her story and encouraging other women to pursue careers in special operations and combat roles. The incident also had lasting consequences for the military police involved. Thompson was demoted and transferred to a different unit, while Chen received formal reprimand and additional training on military protocols and anti-discrimination policies. The entire military police division underwent sensitivity training to prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. For Sarah Martinez, the arrest that had initially seemed like a career-ending disaster became a defining moment that elevated her status from an exceptional soldier to a symbol of progress and perseverance. Her story inspired countless other women to pursue military careers and showed that excellence and dedication could overcome even the most entrenched prejudices and assumptions about what women could achieve in service to their country.